Today we are testing the new Altis Sigma to find out, is this the best bike or is it overhyped? Yeah, this bike rips in a different way though. Like, it just kind of feels low and heavy. Power of this thing is really nice, man. It really is.
I do not like this thing. It feels like a tank.
So jumping, it's a little weird. The suspension just feels way too soft. But when you hit top speed, the thing just takes off.
All right, so I can come clean a little bit right now. When I rode the pre-production version of this bike, a little skeptical. Pre-production is tough because you never know how much the bike is going to change and you can't really evaluate a pre-production bike. So I had a couple doubts. Now I'm on the production bike, no more doubts. Let's go ride this thing and see how it stacks up. All right, so I'm riding in normal mode right now and pretty underwhelming, I'm not gonna lie, power-wise. I'm gonna switch it really quick here because it is pretty mellow in normal mode. All right, let's see what this sport mode has to offer. Yeah, all right, there's the power. Altis Sigma. Yeah, this bike rips in a different way though. The throttle ramp is pretty mellow on this bike. It's still super fast, but test the brakes there. This doesn't have a ton of snap right off the crack. All right, overall the bike is really smooth actually. I am getting some clanking. Can't quite tell where it's coming from yet, but aside from whatever that clank is, the bike actually feels pretty tight and not too rattly. The weight is actually a really good thing when it comes to keeping the bike pretty planted and stable, but she does feel a little hefty. Now that I'm in some of this tighter turn stuff, like that weight is more pronounced. Like the weight feels low, but it feels kind of awkward. So weight is a good and a bad thing, you can tell right here, right now. More noises are rearing their head. I'm getting a lot of noise up in the front rotor now. But man, I'm still gonna rip it. The power of this thing is really nice, man. It really is. Quiet too. Whoa! The bike still feels a little wide in comparison to other bikes in this category, for sure. The pre-production model felt like that too. Like, it just kind of feels low and heavy. Again, suspension actually feels good on this. Kind of surprised, but it still just has that low front end, man. Oh.
First impressions, it's definitely fast, has lots of power. The power comes on really smooth at the bottom, gradually increases, gets pretty powerful up top. I would say the front suspension seems pretty soft. It seemed like the front end kind of wanted to dive a little bit. The bike definitely feels like really heavy when trying to jump it, or even, you know, scrub, or, you know, just even jumping it normal. It just feels like long, like heavy, fat, and like low to the ground. It feels really bulky. Right as I started riding it, I noticed it was a little noisy, like heard some like clanking, and I don't know if it was like chatter in the rear wheel or chatter with the chain, but definitely a little noisy to ride. It feels more just like a play around bike.
All right, so second time, Altis Sigma. What do you think?
I do not like this thing. It feels a lot lower, it feels longer, and it feels like a tank. It's not light and nimble and like racy. What's even crazier is when you look at it, you're like, oh, that bike looks sick. Like that bike probably kills it. And then you get on it and it was not what I expected. Maybe if I was just like, you know, a 16-year-old hopping on it and wanted to just go cruise around the neighborhood, hit some jumps, stuff like that. Yeah, it's an awesome bike, but if you're trying to race this bike, I would not recommend it.
Man, top speed, this thing is fast. Real smooth power, like low middle range, but when you hit top speed, the thing just takes off. It's crazy. So jumping, it's a little weird because it almost is like dead engine in the air. You kind of have to use the throttle to manage your pitch. Yeah, it might be a little more front end heavy for sure. As far as cornering and stuff, it corners really well. See, it does feel, the front end feels pretty planted. And I think that is because it's a little heavier in the front. I think the biggest thing for me was just jumping it. Jumping it felt weird. The suspension just feels way too soft. Every time you land, you bottom out. And then even the whoops and stuff, it's really springy. It doesn't really do much. It hurts every time you land, to be honest.
It was important to also get first impressions from two top-level riders, being Jet and Rob. After talking through some of this stuff, the specs on paper pretty much add up to what we were feeling. At 194 pounds, it's one of the heaviest of the category, and it's not really a big bike. So as a result, that weight does feel noticeable. It's got a slightly longer wheelbase than a lot of the competitors in this category, which, paired with the weight, feels good for stability, but maybe not as good in the corners. You can hear it in the video. It's got some noticeable clunking in the rear, which we'll need to pinpoint. Honestly, we really wish Altis had supplied us with the MX version instead of the standard version for this test, because we're so off-road focused here at ECR, and the slightly smaller 16-inch rear wheel and stiffer suspension would probably have garnered some better opinions in the geometry and suspension department. While the smaller rear sprocket on the standard is nice for top speed, we'd probably also prefer the larger sprocket that comes on the MX to give it a little more snap down low when you need it. That's all to say, the powertrain does feel really good on this bike. It's smooth, controlled, and abundant. And it should be worth noting, it's nice to see another gear-driven motor option here on the Altis. But for the rest, let's finish this conclusion here on the track. All right, so we just spent a full day on the Altis Sigma. We took it to some desert riding, and then we also took it to the pit bike track and hit some jumps on it just to try to get more of a well-rounded feeling on the bike. And the question, is this the best bike or is it overhyped? And to be honest with you, I think it's a little bit of both. I still think it is a really good bike. I think there's a lot of nuances to the bike that are really positive. Notably, I think the power delivery is the best attribute of the bike. I like the way that it rolls on, real smooth and has a lot of power. I think the brakes are great. I think the seat feels really nice. It's a very comfortable bike to be on, but I think that for you true dirt riders out there, I don't think that this is a real dirt bike. When you look at the bike, it is a really cool looking bike, and I think that that is why this bike got a little overhyped, is people look at it and you think it's something that it's not. And the reason I say that is just the way that the bike feels balanced. I think that, yes, it has the notorious low front end, but the weight of the bike feels a little off to me. The CG of the bike feels really low and really heavy, and it makes it kind of corner weird. And when you get this thing in the air, it feels pretty unusual. So Jet said it best. I think that this is more of a street bike than it is a dirt bike. It's a street bike dressed in dirt bike clothing. And that's just my first impression. We're obviously gonna ride this bike more and give you our feedback on it, but I think this is a much better bike than the pre-production bike that I tested. However, I think that there's a few things on this bike that kind of hold it back from being the best dirt bike out there. So to answer the question, is this the best bike or is it overhyped? Well, we're gonna find out more. We're gonna do more dirt testing with this bike and find out what the best bike is. But I have a hunch that some other bikes are gonna edge this one out when it comes to off-road. Let me know if you guys have experience with it and what you think. And yeah, thanks for watching. See ya.